Hello, fellow conservatives. Tonight, from the economy and the national debt to the minimum wage and education, Barack Obama and the progressive agenda have been nothing but destructive to future generations. I explain how specifically the statists among us have threatened the prosperity of our children and grandchildren. This is Veley TV.
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We will preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we will sentence them to take the first step into 1,000 years of darkness. If we fail, at least let our children and our children's children say of us, we justified our brief moment here. We did all that could be done.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to Veley TV. I received a question yesterday on social media from someone who I actually went to high school with. He was a good friend of mine, but he's a liberal. We have strong disagreements on a number of issues. And he asked the question, how has Barack Obama been a threat over the past 8 years to his future? How has Barack Obama been a threat through his various policies and big government philosophies? How has he been a threat to future generations? And so I thought I would make that into an episode of Veley TV tonight, because it's really it's an important question. It's important to understand the modern day Democrat Party. It's important to understand the progressive movement. It's important to understand their motives and how dangerous their proposals are, because they are dangerous. The Democrat Party, the progressives, they're more than just a bunch of compassionate people. They're more than just, a party of tolerance and diversity. They are a radical movement. That's what they are. That's who they are. And so I want to go into detail a little bit more about that tonight and answer that question. But first, I just have to say that tonight's episode was heavily inspired. In addition to the question that I received, it was also heavily inspired by one of my favorite books. And I just want to take a minute to recommend it to everybody out there. It's Plunder and Deceit by Mark Levin. I'm sure you've heard of it, but if you're a conservative out there, especially a young conservative, and you haven't picked up this book yet, I highly, highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite on my bookshelf. Plunder and Deceit, Big Government's Exploitation of Young People and the Future. Mark Levin, in my opinion, is one of the most brilliant minds in the country right now. And the way he set up this book is genius. It goes, each chapter he talks about a different issue. He talks about the debt. He talks about education, immigration, the environment, the minimum wage, national security, the Constitution, and it all tells how progressivism, liberalism, is a threat to our future. Plunder and Deceit by Mark Levin. I highly, highly recommend it to you guys. So there are lots of things that I could talk about tonight. As a matter of fact, if I were to spend an entire show discussing everything, every single way Barack Obama and the left have been a threat to our future, I would be here for probably about 5 hours. I would probably be here for about 5 hours, at which point you guys would tune out, and I really wouldn't blame you. So I'm not going to go over everything tonight, but I'm going to hit some of the key issues. Some of the areas where the Democrats are perhaps the most destructive and most threatening. Starting with the economy. The economy. The liberals, I know it's cliche to say, but it's true. The liberals believe in taxing, spending, and regulating. Three things: taxing, spending, and regulating. You'll get your average Democrat saying, no, that's not what we stand for. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. That's what liberals stand for. Barack Obama has been the biggest spender in United States history. He has added more to the debt than every single prior president, 1 through 43, combined. And just to put things into perspective for you, ladies and gentlemen, I want to go over the budgets year by year throughout Obama's administration. In 2009, fiscal year 2009, this is when Congress passed the Economic Stimulus Act. It was $253 billion. Now, this is nothing compared to subsequent deficits ran up by the Obama administration. Fiscal year 2010, $1.65 trillion. Fiscal year 2011, $1.23 trillion. Fiscal year 2012, $1.27 trillion. That's trillion, folks, with a T. With a T. Fiscal year 2013, $672 billion. Fiscal year 2014, $1.07 trillion. Fiscal year 2015, $327 billion. Fiscal year 2016, $1.42 trillion. Now, all of this adds up to an enormous amount of money. I believe it's close to $8 trillion that Barack Obama has, $7 or $8 trillion, that Barack Obama has single-handedly added to the national debt. This on top of over $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities that no one seems to talk about. These are things that we as a country, our government, is liable to pay, but we don't have the savings set aside for it yet. So trillions and trillions and trillions. The national debt right now, the overall national debt is quickly approaching $20 trillion. That in addition to well over $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities. This is the nature of big government progressivism. Taxing, spending, and regulating. Endless borrowing. They are on automatic pilot, folks. There is no end in sight. And here's the thing. Here's the thing that I want young people out there to understand. This debt, these record deficits, this is unsustainable. A country can't go on like this. This is no way to run a country. Some of you might say, well, I don't really feel the effects of it. It's not really affecting me. It will. One day it will. This debt isn't magically going to go away, folks. It's not like we can just wave a magic wand and poof, it's gone. Who do you think is going to be responsible for this debt? I am. My children are. My grandchildren are. We're going to be the ones left with the bill. And this is why I get so frustrated when I hear young people out there blindly supporting Bernie Sanders and this idea of free college tuition. Because it's not free. All it is another spending program that'll add more to the debt and create more of a burden on for my future and the future of my children and grandchildren. On the issue of debt, the founding fathers couldn't stand the idea of debt. They despised debt. As a matter of fact, John Adams once said, quote, "There are two ways to conquer and enslave a nation. One is by sword, the other is by debt." Thomas Jefferson, by the way, also had several similar quotes talking about debt as a means to enslave a society. And it's absolutely true, is it not? When you're forced to live, when you as a society are forced to function under growing mounds of national debt, is that not enslavement? You are forcing future generations to pay it off. You're forcing future generations to have that burden of one day dealing with it. That is enslavement. That is enslavement. Young people out there, Barack Obama and the radical left have enslaved you. They have enslaved you. The minimum wage. I want to talk about this because this is something that most young people are in favor of raising. Most young people are, raise the minimum wage. What is the problem? Just raise it. It'll be good. More money in my pockets. And I understand that. I mean, on the surface, it sounds great, doesn't it? You'll be taking home more money each week or every other week. You'll be able to do more. You'll be able to, buy that PlayStation that you've wanted, or you'll be able to go on more dates or go to the movies more. Raise the minimum wage. It means more money for me. And so, most young people support politicians like Barack Obama, like most on the left, who are advocates of raising the minimum wage. Here's the kicker, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the kicker. That money has to come from somewhere. That money has to come from somewhere. Let's say, just for the sake of this discussion, that overnight tonight, the federal government unilaterally raised the minimum wage across the board, both in the private sector and for federal workers. Raise the minimum wage across the board. Let's say they raise it $5 an hour. Up, an additional $5 an hour. How would business owners react to that? Suddenly, they'd have to pay an additional $5 more per hour per employee, right? They'd have to look at their budget again, right? What would they do? It's not like they can just snap their fingers and come up with this extra $5 an hour for each employee. That's a lot of money added up over time. That money has to come from somewhere. They have to find some way to compensate. So what do? In most situations, they fire people. It results in layoffs. They say, I'm sorry, the minimum wage went up. We can't afford it right now. We need to compensate somehow. We're gonna lay people off. This is exactly what happened last year in California. That idiot governor over there, Jerry Brown, who's a complete kook. He raised the state's minimum wage to $15 per hour. 1 week later, the University of California at Berkeley announced that 500 jobs were being cut. The university was already experiencing massive deficits each year, well over $100 million. And when the minimum wage was raised, they simply couldn't make things work. The only thing that they could do in order to save money was fire people, lay people off. It's unfortunate, but that's what happens, folks. And yet, Barack Obama and the left constantly and endlessly insists on raising the minimum wage. Barack Obama was once quoted as saying that increasing the minimum wage for that federal contractors are required to pay their employees to $10.10 an hour, which would be an increase from $7.25 an hour, would, quote, lift millions of Americans out of poverty immediately. That's not true. What raising the minimum wage does is it kills jobs. It directly affects young people. Why? Because young people are the ones who are typically working for minimum wage. And then there's the argument, while we're on the subject, that the minimum wage should be higher because it needs to be a livable wage. How many times have you heard that from the left? Raise the minimum wage because I need to be able to live off it. People need to be able to live off of it. That was never the intent of the minimum wage. The minimum wage wasn't meant to be a livable wage. It was meant to be a baseline wage that allowed young people, particularly young people, to enter the labor force and to get create a foundation for themselves, so that eventually they can climb the employment ladder and start making more money. It was never meant to be a livable wage. That wasn't the point of it. That wasn't the point. But Barack Obama and the left, their insistence on raising the minimum wage, I just want you young people to know that this isn't a good thing. It's not something to celebrate. It's not something to applaud. It's an assault on your future. And then there's the issue of education. Education. Barack Obama is pro-union and against school choice. He's against school choice. He destroyed the school choice program in Washington, D.C. He's spoken out against it numerous times in the past, and he's spoken out in favor of teachers' unions. Unions like the NEA, the National Education Association, and the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers. These are big unions. They're special interest groups. And they constantly lobby for their own interests, not the interests of the students. That's the problem. They're a lobbying group. That's what lobbyists do. They lobby for their own members, for themselves, right? Barack Obama and the unions opposed something called school choice. I know most of you probably know what that is, but younger people in the audience might not. School choice essentially says that the parents and the kids are able to make their own decisions as to what school they want to send their kid to. As it stands right now, the federal government does that. The federal government is the one, they're the ones making these decisions for young people, telling them what school they need to go to. Barack Obama is opposed to school choice. These unions are opposed to school choice. And the reason they are so opposed to school choice, something that I, by the way, am strongly in favor of, is because it would mean less students would be attending the failing schools where union members teach. It's all about money and power to them. They oppose school choice because opposing school or being in favor of school choice would mean less money and less power for the unions and for the Democrats, because let's be honest, the Democrats are in bed with the unions. They're not in the interest. They're not working, I should say, in the interest of students. They're just not, folks. And it's sad. There have been several efforts in the past to reform our education system, to move to a merit-based system where bad teachers are removed from the schools and good teachers are praised for their work. That's the way it should be, right? Doesn't that make sense? The unions and the left constantly stand in the way of that. They make it nearly impossible for bad professors, bad teachers to be held accountable by lobbying for different laws that benefit them. They don't pay attention to the students. Millennials out there, they don't pay attention to you. They pay attention to money and to power. That's it. That's it. And then, while we're on the subject, of course, there's the issue of indoctrination in the classroom. Endless social experimentation. Kids today are taught about white privilege. They're taught about social justice. They're taught about they're taught about the necessity of safe spaces. They're taught about trans this and trans that and trans the other thing. These are the things that then of course there's Common Core, folks. We can't forget about that. This is the nature of our current education system. We have the unions that we need to deal with, that we need to somehow defeat. We have the leftists who are with the unions that we need to defeat. And we have the battle of indoctrination that needs to be addressed. All of which are a severe threat to the future of the millennials. You look at the issue of indoctrination. Let me just say one more quick thing about that. Does anybody else see it as a problem if you go into class every single day and you're constantly being fed one side of the political spectrum and one side only? Does anyone else see that as a problem? I do. I see it as a big problem. If you're going to talk politics with your students, talk about both sides. Don't tell them what side to adhere to and what side to believe in. Give them both sides and let them choose for themselves if you're going to talk about politics at all. Now, of course, I happen to believe that there are some classes where politics are completely inappropriate. I had a writing professor my sophomore year of college, writing professor, who one day went on a big anti-Republican rant in the middle of class, calling Republicans racist and misogynist and money-grubbing people, basically generating fear for the Republican Party. And there you go. You cannot sit there and tell me that that is not a threat to our future. We need both sides. We need to have these debates. We need to talk it out with each other. Students should be encouraged to share ideas with each other, as opposed to what's going on now, where conservatism is oppressed on many campuses across the country. And indoctrination is an issue that I'll be addressing a lot, actually, in later episodes. But folks, this is just the tip of the iceberg. It really is. I touched upon education, the minimum wage, the economy. All these are areas where the left wing are extremely threatening to future generations. But there are others. Of course there are others. Immigration, climate change, the evisceration of our Constitution, the gutting of our military, national security issues, on and on and on. All around, the Democrats, the modern day liberal, is a serious, serious threat to your future, to the future of your children, to the future of your grandchildren. Folks, thanks so much for watching. Veley TV is released every single weeknight at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. I really would appreciate it if you liked, commented, and subscribed. Also, check out my radio show on youthrevolt.org, which airs live every weeknight at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. I'll see you tomorrow, folks. God bless.